After being an English executioner from 1884 until 1891, hangman James Berry executed more than 130 criminals. But the figure that returned to haunt his dreams most often was Dr. Philip Henry Eustace Cross. Was he haunting him because he wasn't guilty, or just because Berry has chosen to be an executioner? It was a murder that shocked Victorian Ireland. Philip Henry Eustace Cross was born on the 15th of April 1824 at Shandy Hall, outside the post town of Coachford, Cork. The River Dripsey, a mountain stream, ran through the neighbourhood, flowing beneath a bridge built by the local gentry, including Cross's grandfather. Indeed, the Cross family were deemed to have been great improvers locally, converting much of their Shandy Hall estate into green crops. Cross, the eldest of 5 children, was born at Shandy Hall in 1823. Little is known of his younger years, save that he was reputedly a bit of a wild card. His father was a dubious character who made a small fortune as a moneylender and relief worker during the Great Famine. He was known as Philly Sayed Cathach, Philly of 100 battles, on account of his frequent appearance as a litigant in the law courts, to which he arrived driving a tandem composed of a horse and a bullock. Cross was educated by private tutor and in 1843 attended Trinity College, Dublin. At the age of 25, he joined the British Army as an assistant surgeon and served in various locations around the world fighting in the Crimean War, for which he received a Sebastopol clasp and the Indian Mutiny, receiving an Indian Mutiny Medal. Born in 1840, Mary Laura was the daughter of Richard Marriott, an English gentleman from Essex. She had been a treasured child, not least because 3 of her siblings had succumbed to disease shortly before her birth. But marriage eluded her until 1869, when the 29-year-old caught the eye of a senior British Army surgeon, Dr. Cross. As Surgeon Major Cross, he was for many years attached to the 53rd Regiment and served in the Crimea, Canada, and other foreign stations. He does not appear to have been popular in the army, although it is recorded that his courage was indomitable and that with fearless bravery he repeatedly saved the lives of others at the peril of his own. At the age of 45, he married Mary Laura Marriott, 16 years his junior, in St. James's Church, Piccadilly, London. Just days later they sailed for Canada so that the surgeon could rejoin his regiment. It was common for husbands to be older than their wives due to societal norms that favored older men as providers and heads of household, combined with practical considerations related to the economic realities of the time. But there were whispers circulating that Mrs. Cross's father disapproved of her relationship for several reasons. One prevalent rumor suggested that he believed her partner was significantly older than her, raising concerns about compatibility and shared life experiences. Others speculated that he might have disapproved of the man's background or lifestyle, fearing that it might not align with the values he held dear for his daughter. This tension created an undercurrent of unease in their relationship, prompting discussions among family members about the future and the importance of parental approval in matters of the heart. When Mrs. Cross's father died in the 1870s, Dr. Cross succeeded to her fortune of £5,000, which allowed him to comfortably occupy his time as a gentleman farmer. He was also an avid hunter. This led to trouble with the neighbouring farmers, and the doctor suffered the current local penalty of popular disapproval: boycotting. But he was not a man to take things lying down, as Roe Head recalled. Attacked with stones by roughs at a coursing meeting, he made such a good use of his riding whip, without which he seldom appeared in public, that his assailants were soon glad to beat a retreat. Some may not have liked him, but, in general, Dr. Cross was highly regarded as an intelligent and well-bred gentleman who could claim friendships in the grandest social circles. Life for the doctor and his wife was relatively uneventful, punctuated every year or so with the birth of another of their 6 children. That was until the arrival of the bewitching young governess, Miss Effie Skinner. Dr. Cross had never been a ladies' man and often expressed his aversion to what he termed chattering females. So for a time, everything went on smoothly in the doctor's house, but it was the calm that preceded the storm. Laura had poor health and suffered from a sensitive stomach and nervousness. She likely had epilepsy, as the house servants often saw her collapse. She also had heart palpitations, nausea, hallucinations, dizziness, and sudden feelings of fear, anxiety, and depression. Because of this, it's unlikely that Dr. Cross and Mrs. Cross had a healthy relationship. Instead, Dr. Cross took up hunting. However, when a nearby farmer complained about him hunting on his land, Dr. Cross hit the man hard enough to injure him badly. The farmer was awarded £200, and Dr. Cross was banned from hunting with the Ballincollig Hussars. The only friends the Crosses had in Ireland were John and Teresa Caulfield, who lived 2 miles away. Laura and Teresa became close friends while their husbands played cards and smoked. In July 1886, Laura left Ireland to visit family in Essex because she felt trapped at Shandy Hall and was having more epileptic attacks. At that time, the usual treatment for seizures was potassium bromide, a bitter powder that could calm the nerves but also cause side effects like nausea and mood swings. It was noted that it could easily be mixed with poisons like arsenic. After Laura left, Dr. Cross visited the Caulfields and met Miss Effie Skinner, a beautiful 20-year-old who was recently hired as a governess. Dr. Cross quickly became infatuated with her. Effie was the daughter of a Scottish minister and had spent her youth in Germany and Switzerland. She had never been to Ireland before starting her job on June 22nd. It's easy to see why Dr. Cross might be drawn to a young, educated woman. Effie may have seen him as a way to improve her social standing or genuinely liked him. By late October 1886, Effie told Teresa she planned to leave her job the following January, and Teresa dismissed her with a month's notice. When that month was up, Effie immediately began working for Dr. Cross, supposedly as a governess for his daughters. Laura had returned from England and soon confronted her husband about his relationship with Effie. He weakly denied it and promised loyalty. However, Laura wasn't convinced, and in January 1887, Effie was let go. Laura generously paid for her train ticket to Dublin and may have helped her find a new job. After Effie left, Dr. Cross became angry and hostile towards Laura. He secretly wrote letters to Effie, using a worker to send them, and he travelled to Dublin for 3 nights, where it's believed he met with her again. They also spent time together at a hotel in Dublin after attending the Punchestown races. In the weeks that followed Effie's dismissal, Dr. Cross entered into a dark and dangerous mood. He was constantly cursing and threatening his wife, to whom he now took an active dislike. He began a secretive correspondence with the governess, sending an employee to the post office with his letters and collecting the replies in person. He escaped to Dublin for 3 nights and stayed at the Hibernian Hotel on Dawson Street, where he is believed to have rekindled his tryst. The lovers also stayed together at the LNWR Hotel on Dublin's North Wall, once after a day at the Punchestown races. During one of these encounters, Effie Skinner became pregnant. Dr. Cross began preparing for his wife's murder. By the end of March, Laura's fainting fits had become so bad that an old school friend from Yorkshire called Mavinia Jefferson came to Shandy Hall to try and stem this perpetual decline. However, by the middle of May, Laura had taken a serious turn for the worse and was confined to bed. Dr. Cross oversaw her medication. Within a short time of this incident, Laura became very ill with stomach cramps after suffering vomiting and diarrhea and thirst. Cross diagnosed typhoid, though Laura said to one friend, "Phil tells me that I have a disease of the heart," and gave her medication for it. Cross acted as though he was deeply concerned about Laura's health. However, he did not call in any other doctor until the end, when he called in a cousin, Dr. Godfrey of Broomhill, Dripsey. Her condition had deteriorated, and she died on the 2nd of June, 1887. Cross signed her death certificate, something of a rarity in Victorian murder cases involving physicians. This was followed by a speedy funeral. Laura was buried in Magorney Cemetery in Coachford on the 4th of July. The following day, Dr. Cross went to England to give the dreadful news to his children at their schools and to explain to Miss Jefferson in London the cause of his wife's death. All this speed did not sit well with the local residents, even though Cross explained that, as typhoid was the supposed cause of death, speed was to prevent any contagion. 15 days after the funeral, Cross married Effie at St. James's Church on Piccadilly in London. He tried to keep this secret, but it was already known when he returned to Shandy Hall. The police acted because of the trail of suspicious circumstances from the time Effie entered the household. Laura's body was exhumed and found to contain high levels of arsenic and strychnine, but no trace of typhoid. As a result, Cross was arrested and tried for his wife's murder at the Munster Assizes before Justice Murphy, presiding judge at the Munster Winter Assizes, on Wednesday, December 14, 1887. Immense interest was taken in the proceedings. Admission to the court was by ticket, and for such there were several thousand applications, he said. Throughout the 4 days' hearing, every available inch of space was occupied, a great number of ladies, so-called, having secured seats. Cross was defended by Craigie Atkinson, who came up with a defence that since the defendant had served in the Far East and was acquainted with many barely known subtler poisons, that it was unlikely he would have used arsenic, which is the first poison the police would think of. The prosecution demolished this theory by suggesting that while he was a brilliant man, normally, as a criminal, Cross behaved like a fool. Motive was shown, as was the fact that the doctor had purchased arsenic recently and had his sister destroy the bottles he used when treating Laura. The BMJ account of the court proceedings identified Dr. Charles Yelverton Pearson, Professor of Materia Medica in Queen's College, Cork, as the man who made the post-mortem examination. In his evidence, Dr. Pearson confirmed that there was no sign of putrefaction in the intestines and that the heart and lungs were healthy. There was no sign of typhoid fever. However, he found white particles in the gullet, which were arsenic. In the liver, he found 1.28 grams of arsenic. He also found arsenic in the spleen and kidneys. The quantity of arsenic present was quite sufficient to cause death, he noted. He also found traces of strychnine. It appeared that the unfortunate lady had been slowly and regularly poisoned with arsenic, and the finishing stroke given with strychnine, which doubtless caused the characteristic screams heard at midnight by the maid. One of the prosecution's witnesses, Miss Jefferson, an old school friend of Mrs. Cross, visited her frequently at Shandy Hall. An avid diarist, her detailed accounts of Mrs. Cross's dramatically diminishing health proved invaluable in the case against her murdering husband. In her diary, she had recorded the whole story of Mrs. Cross's illness, with all the symptoms of slow poisoning by arsenic. While Miss Jefferson was there, Mrs. Cross had an attack of spasms of the heart, with vomiting, cramps, and diarrhea, the court was told. This began on May 10th, and it continued until her death. Her eyes were inflamed and irritated. Dr. Cross was the only person to attend his wife. He said she was suffering from some form of bilious fever, and he hinted at typhoid. To save appearance, Dr. Cross called in a medical cousin, who obligingly concurred with the doctor's diagnosis, a bilious attack. To others, Dr. Cross represented her case as heart disease. Early in the morning of Thursday, June 2nd, Mrs. Cross died in agony with only her husband present. One of the maids was awakened by her mistress's terrible cries. Dr. Cross remained alone with the dead body throughout the night. In the morning he announced to the maids with callous levity his loss. "Get up, girls. The missus is gone since past 1 last night." He gave no explanation of the 4 minutes of screaming in the night. Cross was quickly found guilty by the jury. Justice Murphy, in pronouncing the sentence of death, said that the crime was one of the most cruel and bloodthirsty of the century. When the murder was uncovered, Effie refused to have anything further to do with the doctor. Cross was sentenced to be hanged in Cork prison on the 10th of January, 1888. By the time the day of his execution arrived, his hair had turned white. The prison register records Cross as being nearly 6 foot, with grey hair, hazel eyes, and a fresh complexion. He had a variety of tattoos: a lion on his chest, stork on his left arm, death head and cross, and bones on his right, in addition to a monkey and dog on his left leg. The execution was not one of Berry's more successful jobs because of a problem regarding the criminal involved. Cross was a well-born gentleman, and his friends in the area of Cork were from the aristocracy and upper classes. In fact, the governor of the prison did not attend the execution because of his feelings about Cross. He sent a deputy to represent him. Berry found that these friends were at the execution to give Cross some emotional support in his last moments. Cross, grateful for their attendance, wanted to stand at attention with respect to them, facing them as he died. Berry, however, traditionally faced his subjects at executions towards the wall, but each time Berry turned Cross to the wall, the doctor would turn around and face his friends again. When Berry protested, Cross did not reply, but just continued doing what he wanted. Finally, an official ordered Berry to stop this silliness and allow Cross to die facing his friends, reminding the executioner that Cross was a respected soldier, and that turning back and forth might twist the rope and cause an accident. Berry had had several bad executions where the criminals were badly injured before they died or strangled to death. Berry did as he was told, and Cross died. Berry would later say that Cross was the bravest man he ever executed. Berry was not pleased to carry out hangings in Ireland due to the hostility the Irish had toward an English executioner, having been threatened at least once. After getting paid, he went back to his home in Bradford, England. Later, he was informed that he needed to return to Cork for an inquest hearing regarding the execution. However, he didn't go back, but the inquest was completed without him. In his will, Philip Cross left his property to his brother Edward to be held in trust for his children from his first marriage, Sophia Mary and Henry Eustace. He also specified that the property should go to his son, Philip Richard, along with financial payments for 2 daughters, Elizabeth Laura Marriott and Henrietta Emmeline. Additionally, he set aside £400 for the male child born of my wife on or about December 23, 1887, who he wanted to be named John and had not yet been baptized. Philip also granted his second wife Evelyn a yearly payment of £60 to be paid in 2 installments every year. However, this payment would only continue as long as she remained a widow. If she remarried, the payments would stop. He made it clear that the funds were meant for caring for their son, and if Evelyn remarried before John turned 21, the money would go directly to him until he reached that age. The situation left by Philip Henry Eustace Cross was tragic, leaving his first family without parents and his second family, Evelyn and baby John, alone.